Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear participants, excellencies, dear colleagues. Welcome to today's online event jointly organized by UNEP and BRI. This is the 13th of the 21 online events organized in the banner of COP5 online events. COP5 events are an informal platform for parties and observers to share information and bring knowledge to advances in technology, research, and policy to the attention of parties and to the global community that the convention serves. Here, we embrace informality as an opportunity for innovation and collaboration, bringing together a spectrum of stakeholders to explore fresh alternatives and solutions. Your participants adds depth and richness to our discussions. Before I hand this over to the moderator, let me go through a few housekeeping notes. So you can adjust your speaker and microphone settings by opening the audio and video menu at the top left corner of your screen. You can also adjust your speaker and microphone at the bottom of your screen by clicking the audio and video options. If you have questions, you can type in the chat panel that is available on the bottom right corner of your screen. And please write your comment and questions and send to everyone. And if you have any technical difficulty, please put your message in the chat box and send it to the host. And please be aware that this event is being recorded and broadcast live on our YouTube channel. Over to you, Goshi.
Thank you very much, Shariful. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you might be listening to our event. My name is Małgorzata Stylo and I work with UNEP Chemical and Health Branch. And we are very pleased to have you joining our event on addressing mercury pollution and biodiversity from science to action. As Shariful mentioned, the event is co-organized by UNEP, Global Mercury Partnership, and Biodiversity Research Institute. So just let me start by giving a few scene opening remarks before we switch to our invited panelists. Pollution, including from unsound management of chemical, remains a key driver of biodiversity loss. Addressing pollution and biodiversity issue in a synergetic manner, for example, through targeted action to minimize mercury impacts on surrounding ecosystem and biodiversity, can help us with magnifying the benefits of our interventions. There are many ways that both environmental agendas, preventing mercury pollution and safeguarding our biodiversity, intersect. These include, for example, mercury accumulation in our food chain, in our fish or other aquatic species, through efforts to transform the artisanal and small-scale gold mining into cleaner and mercury-free sector, and to even empowering indigenous people and local communities who are important custodian of our planet's biodiversity and might be at the same time most affected by the aspects surrounding mercury pollution in multiple ways. This is why the Minamata Convention on Mercury is critical in advancing the efforts to stop the biodiversity loss. And it's critical in meeting the objectives of the Convention of Biological Diversity and the goals and targets of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and vice versa. At its fourth meeting in 2022, the Conference of the Parties to the Minamata Convention, in its decision 4/12, underlined the need to continue gathering knowledge about, raising awareness, and demonstrating contribution of the implementation of Minamata Convention to the other relevant international policies, including those related to the biodiversity. And as we are approaching the COP5, in the Secretariat of Minamata Convention have published a recent report that is actually available as a INF document for the COP. It's a INF document 27 with analysis of the mutually supportive implementation of Minamata Convention on Mercury and the Kunming-Montreal global biodiversity framework. And in fact, in this report, it was identified that 21 out of 23 targets of the framework, the global biodiversity framework, show close links between mercury pollution and biodiversity loss. The report also highlights possible activities to generate co-benefits to the Minamata Convention and the Global Biodiversity Framework, as suggested across these relevant targets. I also wanted to note a draft decision document for the COP5 that talks about more about contribution of the Minamata Convention to the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's decision 5.20, and we're going also to post it in the chat for your reference. And without further ado, let me move to introducing our speakers for today's panel in this context of talking about the linkages between mercury pollution and biodiversity. And next slide, please. And the one after, please. So our event is going to be organized in two parts. The first part will look on the interlinkages between mercury pollution and biodiversity from knowledge and science standpoint. We have two speakers that I'm going to introduce just in a moment. And in the second part of our event, we are going to look onto country experiences in linkages and better coordinating action across the mercury pollution and biodiversity agendas. Next slide, please. So our so our first speaker, the first part of our event, is going to be Dave Evers. He's the executive director, chief scientist, and founder of Biodiversity Research Institute, a nonprofit research organization based in Portland, Maine, in the United States. Dr. Evers has been conducting primary field research on the topics of environmental mercury in biota and the impacts of on wildlife for over 30 years. He's currently also acting as a co-chair of UNEP's Fate and Transport Global Mercury Partnership and has over 160 peer-reviewed publications, mostly about global mercury exposure in biota. Dave, the floor is yours.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Gosha. Hello, everyone. I have the tall order, the task of starting this conversation and exploring the relationship of mercury and biodiversity, and I do think that is a tough relationship to look at, and I'll explore it through this presentation through a new tool, a mapping tool that we are using. Next slide. At first, I just wanted to kind of think through together the relationships that we need to look at, in my mind, on how we start to examine and explore the relationship and the potential impacts of mercury and biodiversity. I think of this Venn diagram where we think of these three topics of biodiversity, ecosystem sensitivity to mercury, and trophic level. They're all important in understanding the relationships. Next. And if you think of this Venn diagram next, we want to ultimately look at where are the locations with the greatest biological diversity in areas with the highest sensitivity for ecosystem mercury methylation with species at the highest trophic level. And those are the sort of areas to start in first, and I guess the scientific sort of first step is to identify those very areas around the world. Next. So I'm just going to go through a few slides in the beginning here just to kind of provide a preamble. Next slide. So trophic level, we all understand trophic level is really important for looking at methylmercury, biomagnification, and bioaccumulation in organisms. And it's those upper trophic level organisms that are most worrisome and of concern from a mercury exposure, methylmercury exposure standpoint. Next. In looking and conducting a meta-analysis for a recent paper that used over 1,600 peer-reviewed references, and understanding mercury exposure in key biota, high trophic level species from around the world. This provides us as a scientific community to really for the first time, to better understand the exposure and the concern of methylmercury in these organisms. And if we kind of look at the left side here, the taxa group of interest, and this is to human health, we can look at this from an eco health standpoint. These organisms, from tuna to billfish to sharks to different species of fish, seabirds, and marine mammals, these are all high trophic level organisms in many of these families that do number over a certain human health threshold that's used in the US of 0.46 parts per million. The reason why this is really important for biodiversity purposes is that when fish hit that mark of 0.46 parts per million, they're already well over the impacts to their behavior, reproductive success, and survival. So when we look at the number of species of tuna, there's 67% of the tuna have at least one sample that we have in our global database that exceeds that level. We can kind of go through this from a taxonomic standpoint and geographic standpoint. So this information is out there and it's starting to be gathered and can be used as a baseline for mercury exposure around the world and which organisms to look at. Next. And eventually we'll want to pull these different indicators together that we've identified. And this is a matrix that's been pulled together in just mercury exposure. Eventually we need to create a mercury matrix like this that relates to biological diversity. What are those biodiversity indicators that we should look at from around the world in these different biomes? So this is something that this step hasn't been taken. I want to show you that this is an example of what needs to be taken. Next. So starting to think about where are those, how do we link that exposure to biological diversity areas? In Africa, there's a good example of biodiversity priority areas that was published in 2014. And this is the sort of information that has been gathered from around the world. Imelda will talk about this a little bit more in her presentation, but the information on the biodiversity levels, that information is known, is mapped, and it's mapped for marine, terrestrial, and freshwater areas. So this is just an example in Africa. Next. And if we know these biodiversity areas, we have an idea of the mercury exposure of organisms around the world, then the next step is understand the ecosystem sensitivity piece. And there's several different layers in a model that can be created and that model can be used for mapping globally the ecosystem sensitivity. Next. So thinking of the sensitivity systems to mercury input, not all systems are alike. Some systems are more sensitive to mercury input, and that sensitivity reflects how much mercury can be methylated by the bacteria in that system. And the methylation of those bacteria relate to many different ways, and it can be from low pH or anaerobic conditions. Wetlands tend to be very high in their abilities to methylating mercury. So there's a lot that goes into a model that you see here in this global map. Next. And with the model, we also look at the sources of mercury. There's a very good information now from the mercury inventories to the Minamata initial assessments and other inventories from around the world to let us know where are those sources of mercury around the world. Next. So adding the sensitivity to the risk equals the threat. So then we can start to look around the world, where are the areas that are most threatened by mercury input and the methylation of that mercury. If we really look at, just focus on the continent of Africa, because we have those biodiversity areas that we've already identified from that 2014 paper. Next. To look at this at a continental level, and looking at a continental level versus a global level provides more definition. If we just scroll over from your eyes from left to right, the risk, the sensitivity, and then the threat. That threat map on the far right, next, also has biodiversity areas that are circled here, next. And those biodiversity areas that I've circled are overlap with the areas that are most sensitive. So we're starting to get at that question that I had, that Venn diagram. Where are the places that we need to look at the most? Next. Next. And then we could do this analysis. This is the analysis part of the model where this fingerprint diagram is for the world. So all these dots represent the level of mercury sensitivity, or the threat, I should say, around the world. The gray dots are Africa. The other white dots around that are the rest of the world. The green dots are the terrestrial. Remember the terrestrial part of the map that I showed you for the African map for biodiversity? The freshwater is blue, and then the purple is more of a global biodiversity sort of priority area. The purpose of looking at this map, though, is we can start, if you look at the upper right quadrant in the red, bordered in red, that's the area where there's the highest sensitivity and the highest risk, and that's the sort of area within the continent that we want to start to look at and determine where is the mercury sensitivity overlapping with biodiversity areas. Next. We could do that for different countries around the world too. So we have done that for Indonesia, Gabon, Colombia. Those are some of the areas that we actually have data, mercury exposure in biotas, upper trophic level species. So we could start to take these fingerprint assessments and look at these different countries around the world and try to assess what's the percentage of the country that has that threat level and it overlaps biodiversity. For Indonesia, it's 77%, for Gabon, 15%, and for Colombia, it's 65%. So it's that upper right quadrant that I'm looking at, by the way. Next. And thinking of Colombia as a case study. Next. Looking at Colombia in a deeper way and looking at the sensitivity, there's a way to look at that globally and a way to look at the regionally. Next. And for Colombia, that sort of information can be pixelated to even watersheds. Next. And the watersheds can be related to that fingerprint diagram again. And there's certain watersheds, if we're interested in trying to detect where those watersheds of greatest concern, where they could be the highest sensitivity, and even if they relate to biodiversity or not, we can still identify certain polygons in the world by watershed. Next.
Sorry, Dave, just to
Yes.
inform you that maybe one, maximum 2 minutes, if you could. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Very good. And I realize I'm going through the slides fast, but these are it's more of the maps that I wanted to instill on everybody on this process of how we're looking at things. So in Colombia, there's a certain watershed, the Cacata watershed in Colombia, where we do have information on mercury and biota. Next. And the mercury levels in the fish, we find that 12 of the 18 species of fish where we do have mercury exposure in that watershed exceed that 0.46 parts per million threshold. So that's worrisome to me, and that provides that information that's sort of how we're comparing our model with the actual data that we're seeing in the field. Next. And so the last slides I just wanted to show you, we can do that same thing for we have panelists from 3 different countries. And I want to look at this really quickly in these 3 different countries. That's how fast we can look at these sort of things. For Uganda, next. Rwanda, you can see on the far right, that's the threat map. Next. And Peru. So we could take these countries out and look at the risks, the sensitivity, and the threat. So that information is known globally now. The last slide. Second to the last slide is this fingerprint diagram again. So for Rwanda, I was surprised to see 81%, that upper right-hand quadrant, 81% of the areas in Rwanda are in that high sensitivity, high risk area. And then we can start to look at how does that overlap with the biodiversity areas or protected areas that we know of. We could do the same thing for Uganda, which is at 69%, and then Peru is 62%. So I think that's the value of looking at this model and using it as a tool to start to understand where are those places in the world that we should worry about the most, and where that mercury, elevated levels of mercury, can overlap with biological diversity areas. Last slide. I know I went through that very fast, but at least we have this information. We can look at it more. I'm very interested in any sort of feedback, and some of the information will be published in a special issue in the journal Ecotoxicology this month, and a second part in the month of November. So thank you very much. And Gosha, I hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Dave. And it's really exciting to see the tool that you presented and their application from global to really country level and really even probably regional, scale. And just for the sake of the time, unfortunately, we have to move. But if you have a question to Dave's presentation, please don't hesitate to post it in the chat. We can try to answer it also through the chat, through the event. And the recording together with the slides will be presented as well later at the Minamata, will be available at the Minamata convention website. So our next speaker is Imelda Dosuetu. She's an environmental scientist and project development analyst in the chemical and health branch of UNEP, where she's involved in the coordination of UNEP Global Mercury Partnership, as well as other mercury-related topics. Her research interest includes an analysis of the impacts of mercury from artisanal small-scale gold mining on aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem, as well as interrelation with biodiversity and ecosystem services. Imelda, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Gosha. I hope you can hear me well. It's fine?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Gosha. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. My name is Imelda Dosuetu, as Gosha said, and I'm part of the Chemicals and Health branch of UNEP. I'm very pleased to be here today to share an overview of the global literature review conducted on artisanal and small-scale gold mining and biodiversity. Next, please. So just to say that this work was initiated back in June 2022 as part of the work, the cross-cutting work of the UNEP Global Mercury Partnership, and in collaboration with the Biodiversity Research Institute of DAVE and the University of Geneva. So the review is now presented in a scientific article soon to be submitted under the special issue that Dave just mentioned on mercury ecotoxicology. Next, please. So today, in terms of contents, three main parts. I will first provide an overview of the documents reviewed, then some of the key highlights, and some of the conclusions and recommendations. Next. Next, please. Since June last year, we have consulted 116 documents, and these include resources and information shared by the members of the UNEP Global Mercury Partnership. So I also would like to take this opportunity to thank the members for sharing information and contributing to this work. These documents were consulted along with the 27 national action plans on ASGM that were available as of July 2023. So this table is just to show that we mainly had scientific articles and reports covering periods from 2015 to 2023. And in terms of geographic coverage, mainly African continent, Latin America, and we had a number of resources also for global coverage. Next, please. Next, in terms of key highlights, this review helped to observe that many of the ASGM countries also present the highest levels of biological diversity distributed over the three key ASGM regions, namely Africa, Asia, and South America, with some of the key countries listed here. In terms of the relationship between ASGM and biodiversity, all of the 27 NAPs reported interactions between ASGM operations and the loss of biodiversity. In fact, we actually had 9 NAPs out of the 27 reporting the occurrence of ASGM within or around the vicinity of protected areas. And we also had more than 20% of the review documents highlighting ASGM activities near or in the premises of biodiversity hotspots and or protected areas. Next, please. So this map is still work in progress, but it was just to show that the ASGM sites that were gathered through the NAPs and were superposed to the key biodiversity areas, just to show that we can see already some of the ASGM sites interacting with these KBAs, especially in the African region. Next, please. This table is also work in progress, but related to the previous map, just to show here that a number of countries, as mentioned, especially on the African continent, have up to 25% of ASGM sites located in these key biodiversity areas. Next, please. In terms of observed impacts, we had 4 main impacts reported both by the NAPS and by the resources consulted. So in order of importance, we had deforestation, land degradation coupled with loss of habitat, chemicals pollution, as well as physical impacts on water. Next, please. So this table is just to show actually how the NAPS reported these key observed impacts. We could see that more than 50% of the NAPS reported deforestation, land degradation, and loss of habitats, as well as chemicals pollution as key impacts resulting from ASTM practices. Next, please. So here we have 3 images taken in the Narok County in Kenya last April. So these are 3 places of the same mining areas just to show the trends in deforestation, loss of vegetation, and forest cover coupled with land degradation and loss of habitats. And this could occur actually due to a variety of reasons, including the conversion of these forest and/or agricultural areas into mining sites, the construction of temporary settlements for miners. Also, some of the woods can be transformed into charcoal for cooking. And in Kenya, we observe actually that the felled trees can be used to build sheds for machinery or cover for dug shafts. Next, please. For chemicals pollution, of course, it's mainly through the amalgamation of the mercury amalgamation to recover gold, or the use of cyanide as an alternative to mercury, or to recover gold from the tailings. So we had nearly 70% of the NAP and 50% of the documents reviewed mentioning the contamination of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems by chemicals. Next, please. Regarding physical impacts on water, it's mainly the increase in water turbidity that was reported as a common physical impact. And this increase is due to ASGM activities near water bodies, which leads to the sedimentation of particles. The increase in turbidity is actually known to reduce the light in the water column and also oxygen levels in the water, leading to the decline in aquatic life in the areas affected. Next, please. This table, just to show the variety of ecosystem services that may be impacted by those observed effects. So we have provisioning services in terms of provision of food, fuel, and fiber, regulating services, as well as supporting services. We can also have some of the cultural services in terms of scientific research or cultural and spiritual beliefs. Next, please.
Imelda, just to flag 1 minute, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, next, please. Next, please. Okay, next, just some conclusions and recommendations. Yes, so as we mentioned, ASGM is interacting with biodiversity. We even saw that ASGM was happening in protected areas and key biodiversity areas, with tropical regions and their key species being of greatest concern, notably because of their great sensitivity to ASGM impacts, as they've already explained earlier. In terms of recommendation for recommendation highlighted here, the need for further action to strengthening policy frameworks around ASGM sector and interaction between with biodiversity. Also, the need for more initiatives towards environmentally friendly closures of mines, for example, through remediation, rehabilitation, and restoration practices, the use of visualization tools to better observe and characterize these impacts. And finally, last but not least, further research, awareness raising, and dissemination of information to document interactions at all stages. Next, please. And in doing so, of course, cross-sectoral and multi-stakeholder approaches should be considered to effectively support the decision-making processes toward the implementation of the Minamata Convention, along with the Convention on Biological Diversity. Next, and I think this is it for me. Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imelda, and it has been very insightful presentation, and to seeing really the knowledge base collected through all these documents. And this is a great presentation that leads us to the second part of our event, which talks about the actions. So you actually end up your presentation and saying, from now we have this information, what can we do? So in our second part of the event, we are going to showcase 3 country experiences. First example is from Peru. We have a video recording from Peru, and just let me introduce the speaker. Dr. Claudia Vega is the coordinator of Mercury program at Centro de Innovación Scientific Amazonia, CINCIA. Claudia has extensive expertise in the study of dynamics and impacts of mercury in Amazonia population and ecosystem. Before joining CINCIA, she was a lead on multiple studies on mercury exposure in Amazon region, included regarding artisanal small-scale gold mining. Please, can play the video.
Hi, I'm Claudia Vega. I'm the Mercury Program Coordinator from the Centro de Innovación Científica Amazónica from Wake Forest University. I'm here to present a little bit of the work that we do in the Peruvian Amazon using bioindicators to assess mercury pollution from ASGM in the Peruvian Amazon. So I want to take you where I work. I work in Madre de Dios, which is the southern part of the Peruvian Amazon, and it's where the Andes meet the Amazon forest. So it's a place of great biodiversity, and it's declared by the Peruvian government as the capital of biodiversity. These are the type of landscape that you can see in Madre de Dios. But when you navigate some rivers, you can see mining activities in these rivers. So this is also the activity that you can see in the rivers of Madre de Dios. And as most of you know, this activity used mercury to extract the gold. So in a report from Artisanal Gold Council in 2018, it was estimated that about 181 tons of mercury were released by this activity in Madre de Dios. Also, this activity deforested about 280,000 acres in Madre de Dios in 2018, until 2018. The mining activity doesn't just deforest the forest, it also converts the forest in mining ponds, as you can see in the picture that I'm showing you right now. And these mining ponds, we know that have a high fish biodiversity. So one of the questions that we have is to know the mercury levels that were in these fish in these mining ponds. And for this, we create a design where we went to mining ponds that look like this and oxbow lakes, which are natural ecosystem in the Amazon, to collect samples of sediment and fish. This is the design of our research. As you can see in the map, the mining area is the yellow area that is in the map. Those are the places where mining activities take place. And you can see there are some fishes that are upriver this mining activity. So we have control sites, which are oxbow lakes, and we have sites affected by mining activity, which are in the yellow area. And most of them are mining ponds. We took sediment and fish sample of these sites, and we took it to the to a Laboratorio de Mercurio Química Ambiental, which is the first mercury lab in the Peruvian Amazon, where we analyzed all the samples. What did we see in the result? We saw that the levels of mercury in sediment from mining ponds and natural offload lake were not different. As you can see in the graphic, there's no significant difference between the levels of mercury from mining pond sediments and natural offload lake. But when we analyze fish, you could see that there's a significant difference between the fish, the mercury level that come from fish from mining pond with the mercury level that come from fish from natural offload lakes. As you can see in the graphic, that is consistent in all the trophic groups. Also, one of the questions that we wanted to answer is knowing if this mercury that you can see higher in mining ponds also go to the terrestrial ecosystem. As you know, that a terrestrial wildlife could also eat from aquatic ecosystem. There are animals such as birds and bats that feed on macrovertebrate and fish. That's why we collect birds and bats from four mining sites that you can see in this map, which are in the red spot that are area deforested by ASDM. And we could also collect it from a control site, which you can see in the map in La Torre, that is inside the Reserva Nacional Tambopata, a natural protected area. And what did the results show? That the bat from mining areas, especially invertebrate and piscivore, have very high levels of mercury in the fur. And when we focus in the group that were collected in control site and ASDM site, you can see a significant difference between the mercury levels that come from individuals from mining sites, similar to the result that we saw in the fish. And we also see similar results in the feather or bird that we collected in ASDM site and control site. As you can see in this graphic, we observe the higher mercury levels in birds and piscivore birds and invertebrate birds. And when we focus in the groups that we were able to collect in both control site and ASDM site, we see that there's also a significant difference between the birds that were collected, the mercury levels from birds that were collected in mining ponds around in ASDM area around mining ponds, and the one that were collected in control sites. The birds collected in ASDM area have the higher levels of mercury. And when we compare our data with the data reported in the literature, we see that our data is one of the highest reported in the literature. You can see the blue columns that are the average levels that we collected in some of the species in our study. And we see that also in piscivore. As you can see in this graphic, the levels in kingfisher are among the highest reported in the literature. So using biodiversity, using bioindicators, we can see how mercury levels are higher in areas for ASDM. And that brings us to our last question. What should be done with the mining ponds in Madre de Dios? Are these mining ponds just a source of biodiversity in the Amazon, in the Madre de Dios Amazon? Or are these mining ponds are a source of risk to aquatic and terrestrial wildlife? And another question that I want to give for you guys is, these mining ponds affecting just local fauna? What about the migratory birds? Well, with these questions, I want to end my presentation. I want to thank you for your attention. And we are Cincia, that we are an alliance with Wake Forest University and USA, and we work with a lot of local institutions and international institutions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken, for playing the video. And unfortunately, Claudia was not able to join us online, but I think she finished her presentation with a very interesting question. So I wanted to maybe invite one of the panelists to reflect on her last question. So what should be done with the mining ponds from the case study that she presented?
Thanks, Coach. I can answer that question with just maybe an open wonder with all the participants too. Yeah, I think this is a major concern in the world. The ASGM activities create degradation of habitat and also contamination within the system, as Claudia showed. And those levels are impactful to organisms, from the piscivorous birds and the insectivorous birds and mammals. One idea that I've explored with others, from people that work with bamboo, is to potentially grow vegetation like bamboo at some of these sites where there's a stabilization of the shoreline. That stabilization reduces erosion of the area, and that erosion remobilizes mercury that's in the area. But also some of the vegetation, some species of bamboo, which are fast growing, can also have an uptake of mercury in that bamboo, and then you'd have to harvest that bamboo and take care of it in the right way. But those are some of the ways to start to stabilize the area. And Claudia's right, it ends up being a habitat trap now for species to come in and try to use that habitat for breeding. But that habitat ends up being a sort of trap for them, where they're not producing like they could in other areas that aren't as contaminated. So there's just a quick thought.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dave. And if anybody else have any thoughts, of course, they're welcome in the chat. Meanwhile, I would like to move to another panelist. We are going to continue also talking more about the ASGM in the next presentation afterwards in Uganda. But first, I would like to introduce Patrick Umuhoza. Patrick is an international environmental agreements officer at Rwanda Environment Management Authority. He's working at REMA across both biodiversity and chemical and waste multilateral environmental agreements. Through his work, he has provided legal advice regarding ratification and accession to the new convention, participated in regional international negotiation, and contributed to the domestic multilateral environmental agreements through inclusion of related domestic laws and monitoring of MEAs. Patrick is going to give us a broader perspective also regarding the coordination amongst biodiversity and pollution pillar at the national level. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Margot. Mercury is a global concern that demands a global solution. Now, the tool designed to assist the global community signifies that the commitment of the international community to address the issues of mercury. It is now our responsibility to establish the necessary mechanism that can aid countries in achieving the shared goals of eliminating mercury and safeguard our biodiversity. It is crucial always to remember the significant connection between Minamata Convention and biodiversity. If we can consider mercury to history, we can protect both health and biodiversity from its harmful effect. To accomplish this common objective in Rwanda, we have set up mechanisms to guarantee the effective monitoring and fulfillment of the obligation agreed upon under the Minamata Convention and other multilateral environmental agreements that Rwanda ratified. Next. One of the successful mechanisms that Rwanda put in place to coordinate the implementation of MEAs is initiation of the meeting for national focal points that brings both chemicals and biodiversity national focal points, MEAs, in charge of MEAs together. And this initiative started in 2012, where Rwanda introduced an annual series of national focal points meeting to coordinate and manage the implementation of all MEAs Rwanda ratified. So this kind of initiative every year, the Rwanda Environment Management Authority organize and host national focal points meeting, including the one for Minamata. Next. So the first or initial national focal point meeting serves as a collaborative planning platform for MEAs. During this meeting, the ones for chemicals and the one for biodiversity, the one dealing with the Minamata implementation is also just together with the one of biodiversity as a joint planning together to make sure that the biodiversity is not standalone, as we know that all chemicals conventions are serving for saving the biodiversity. The second MES is also coming as an evaluation opportunity. So we just convene at the second meeting of the year. The one of biodiversity come together with the one of Minamata and the other chemical-based conventions, and they come together and assess the implication and the outcome from the joint planning, as well as just share the challenges and look for the solutions together as both MEAs. Next. So now, beyond of this, regarding with the opportunity we used to get, we just envisage to see how this kind of opportunity, for example, the one under the Minamata special program can just support us to bring those under the CBD, for example, and then we created something like steering committee. We're having a standalone steering committee for chemical-based convention, and this one for Rio Convention steering committee. So the Rio Convention include the CBD, as we all know, and the chemicals brings the other 5 conventions: Rotterdam, Stockholm, Minamata, and Basel, therefore. So now those 4 conventions for chemicals are just there evaluating the opportunities associated to this chemical-based convention and bring together with these Rio conventions to see how the chemicals can be managed to safeguard our atmosphere as well as the biodiversity. Next. So now the role of committee, each national steering committee, they have a standalone terms of reference that governs their work. And also they meet twice in a year. Sometimes the second, even during the planning, we combine the two to ensure that at least nothing or the opportunity we get is also serving to safeguard the biodiversity. Now, this commitment plays a pivotal role in the process of domestication multilateral environmental agreement. And what we do sometimes in terms of receiving the claims from the population, this steering committee is coming together saying now we are having this kind of disease under the plants, but we also talk about the new or introduction of the new chemical under our country, as well as see whether this kind of chemical will not directly affect or indirectly affect the biodiversity. If we find that that kind of new introduction of chemical in just having direct or indirect effect to biodiversity, we recommend to have it on the ministerial order listing the prohibited chemicals to be used as well as imported in Rwanda. So these platforms so far, they plays a crucial role from our country, where now we're having more than 87, including the mercury, that are prohibited to be imported as well as used in Rwanda. So going to mining, going to wherever, it just says a new technology that can impose the impact to biodiversity. It is supposed to be assessed before being allowed such kind of technology to be used in the mining sector. So it also serves as an opportunity to address and seek solution for the barriers that are hindering the effective control and implementation of in general, as raised in the members of the committee. Next. Thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for showcasing the very successful model that Rwanda is applying to better coordinate between the pollution and biodiversity agenda, and as you mentioned, also the climate change. I was just wondering whether you have really nicely explained how the mechanism has regular meetings, there's a communication with different focal points. whether you have also ad hoc interaction, let's say you're preparing reporting for the Minamata Convention, and you need inputs perhaps from the biodiversity colleagues, whether you have mechanism also to have this kind of more focus on centers activities or topic interaction between different colleagues from various focal points.
Yeah, thank you very much. Concerning the preparation of the report, we have a technical team if it falls under chemical convention, but also we know that the chemicals cannot be a standalone concept. So better we bring those dealings with biodiversity. So because we are having a kind of joint planning at the first national focal point meeting, including that one, if we are having biennial report under Minamata Convention, it is supposed to be under the planned activities to be conducted within such period. So during this joint planning, of course, as I have already mentioned, the national focal point brings together all national focal points, either for biodiversity or for chemicals, which means, and even during the finalization, during the preparation, as well as the presentation of the outcome from the report that prepared, we just bring different experts, including those under chemical steering committee, as well as the other national stakeholders that we think are having direct contribution towards the report under preparation. So the other thing that we need also to talk about is when we are just having, for example, if we have a COP5 for Minamata Convention, we also come together and prepare what we call national position to be taken to the COP. So if we're having mercury as the major cause of the extinction of some biodiversity components, it is better to have it discussed and just inform the one who is going to represent our country that if you are going to go here, please make sure that this will be on table of discussion. Please make sure that you raise the voice of our country concerning the protection of biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for providing this additional information and details. I think this is very interesting to understand how this works at the national level. For the sake of the time, I need to move. We have one other panelist from Uganda. It's Anne Nakafero. She's a Senior District Support Officer at National Environment Management Authority in Uganda. Among others, Anne was acting as the National Coordinator for development of Minamata National Action Plan for artisanal and small-scale gold mining in Uganda. And Anne is continuing working on that issue, is engaged in the Planet Gold program in Uganda, and continues working across pollution and biodiversity agenda at the national level. Anne, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Gosha. Greetings, everyone. Given the limited time, I'll be brief. I'll try to only point out other areas of great concern. Otherwise, my presentation is about strengthening legal, institutional, and regulatory frameworks, processes, and implementation measures in line with today's theme of the side event. Next, please. Yeah, I'll give you that is the introduction, or that covers what I'm going to be talking about. Next, please. Yes, I thought it would be important for us to appreciate that ASGM has a very big contribution to the livelihood in Uganda and generally the globe all over, in as much as we are pointing out the negative impacts that affect biodiversity. It doesn't mean that ASGM sector is, is not a worthwhile sector. It is. We only need to organize it and have it formalized, then we shall be able to mitigate any environment impacts that arise out of that. Next, please. Most of us might be aware of the global mercury pollution from the different regions, including Africa, including Uganda. But what I would want to point out here is that 73% of the gold produced by ASGM is with mercury. So there's a lot of effort that needs to be done in formalizing this sector and bringing this use of mercury to a very minimal level. Next, please. Yes, I would wish to emphasize here that the informalness of the ASGM sector is a catalyst to climate change and biodiversity loss. At this point, when most of the countries all over the globe have adopted the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, it is a point for us to stop and think and see how we can work together, utilizing the limited finances to uplift every sector of the environment, including the ASGM sector. In Uganda, our experience centers around the following: that ASGM's impacts on the environment have mainly been seen at the ecosystem level. Our understanding is that in as much as we have the minute organisms or phytoplanktons, the fish uptaking mercury, this may not necessarily affect their growth. We are yet to find out from research that in as much as there is bioaccumulation along the food chain, the organisms involved, their systems may be not significantly be affected. However, when you look at the ecosystem level, the habitat destruction is quite much coming out of the ASGM impacts. We have seen deforestation, we have seen soil degradation, like you can see in the photographs. We have seen turbidity of water, like Imelda highlighted. We have seen generally the loss of habitats. For instance, our NAP indicates that we have more pits than shafts. And when you have more pits, it means you have opened up a big area for and hence vegetation loss. You have affected the below ground biodiversity, whose interventions is still yet limited. And therefore, there is need to come together and see how we minimize the opening up of areas, and yet we can intensify mining through integrated efforts. There is a lot of non-restoration of pits across the areas where SGM is taking place, not only in Uganda. And moreover, the material that is used to construct pits is wood. So we need to see that the stock of wood that will continue with sustaining the supply to construct the pits is guaranteed. And therefore, this should be one of the focus of the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework. We have seen mining in protected areas. Definitely this is illegal, but we have also seen mining close to protected areas. And therefore, the effect still spills over to the protected areas. Next, please. Water pollution, turbidity has been observed in the photographs that you can see, the uppermost left. Mercury, effluent of containing mercury is discharged into the open environment. It goes into the wetlands, and the same water could be taken or drunk along the stream. You can see in the lower photos, the turbidity reducing the quantity of water in these rivers. And once you reduce the quantity, it means even the aquatic life will be affected. The oxygen within there would be affected. The breeding grounds will be affected, among others. Next, please. Now, this slide is speaking to deforestation. If you look at the photographs, this was taken in Geita, I think a week ago. Uganda, the team in Uganda under the Planet Gold, Uganda was able to visit Tanzania to benchmark on the different technologies. But while we're in the field, we took note of this concern. It is not only in Kenya, even Uganda, but these are the photographs that I was able to display. You can see the amount of timber or timber poles that are harvested. And there you can see the shaft that is being constructed using what? Timber. If you look at these poles, they're likely to be 2 to 3 years old. So the question that we have, can we sustain that supply if we do not work together as CBD, as Minamata, as all stakeholders in biodiversity conservation and chemicals management? If we do not work together, there is a lot of loss of biodiversity that is taking place. And moreover, in most of the state of environment reports for the globe, for the countries, for the regions, you will not see the capturing of deforestation in mining areas. So there is a lot that needs to be done, especially in data collection, to inform policy and decision making. Next, please. This was taken still at a site in Tanzania. However, this site is regulated in terms. It is a small scale artisan and small scale gold mining area. However, they prepare environment and social management plans. So these social management plans assist the Mining Commission in Tanzania to kind of regulate the environmental aspects of mining, like restoration. But this particular photograph was just showing you the magnitude of deforestation. I took this photograph, but well, my camera could have been limited in resolution, but the whole stretch of the road had trees cut down. And when you look at most of these, they seem to have stayed also for quite a long period. So the issue of deforestation is quite high. The issue of biodiversity loss, because trees, forests, this is an ecosystem. If you destroy the habitat, you are destroying a habitat for a caterpillar as well. So it is time for us to have integrated whole sector, whole society approach in managing the environment, in halting biodiversity loss. Next, please. That is soil degradation. I won't say much about it. ASGM is associated with destruction of the soil structure. As we all know, even if we are to restore, we need to have the below ground biodiversity, the bacteria, the fungi communities come into place, especially by safeguarding the topsoil that was initially removed. But from here, you can see, you do not see any topsoil that is saved anywhere. And yet in one of these photos, you can see cultivation going on, but you wonder, will these crops go well in such an environment? Next, please. We do have moved a step in Uganda with support from UNEP, Jeff, and other partners. We have developed the National Action Plan on ASGM in 2019. And last year was another milestone for us. The Mining and Minerals Act of 2022 is now covering ASMs, including gold mining. And now the mining licenses or mineral licenses regime in Uganda is more favorable. It goes up to the individual level. The National Environment Act is covering environment and social impact assessments for the mining sector, but more so covering biodiversity offsets, as I will explain to you ahead. We were privileged to have the Planet Gold in Uganda supporting the formalization of the SGM sector, which among covers use of alternative technologies, formation of minor associations. And I should say here that we are moving steadily. We have benchmarked in Kenya, in Tanzania, and also carrying out really detailed assessments to see how we can kickstart the Planet Gold project and ensure that the livelihoods of the SGM sector are touched, but more so the safeguarding of the environment and the limited use of mercury. We have guidelines for biodiversity offsets in place. Next, please.
And just to note, to flag, maybe just 1 minute to wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That photograph shows you how a regulated mining site can plant trees. That was in Tanzania. So they're able to plant trees and then harvest them and use them. But here we are emphasizing where are the technologies? Where is biotechnology in terms of growing trees that can probably grow faster and be used and yet cannot become invasive in the long term? So this is what we are looking at, that as we domesticate the GPF framework, we should look at possibilities of sustaining and intensifying mining, but utilizing all forms of technologies to sustain the sector. Next, please. I am about to complete. Next. Next, please. The previous slide. Yeah, so from science to action, we need to emphasize the previous slide, please. The whole of government approach. Next, please. I just want to lay emphasis on that. There's the one that's okay. Next. Yes, I want to emphasize my conclusion. We need a whole government, whole society approach. But I wish to emphasize here that we kindly request that the collaboration between the UN country teams and national government agencies or national governments should be strengthened, because we are doing a lot of work, but probably that is not integrative. And at the end of the day, the impact is not that much felt. That is one of the ways we can move from science to action. The other one is targeting biodiversity financing to cover chemicals management as well. And I think this speaks to target 8 or 22 of the GPF. We need to look at ASGM activities and see how we can support the growth of, well, faster growing trees, customize mercury-free technologies, improve the value chain of gold extraction, In addition, to enhance the linkages between government and SGM sector through communication enhancement and feedback. We need to regulate the SGM sector and also strengthen minor voices through associations, federations, resource mobilization. Next, and I think if it wasn't the last one. Yes, thank you so much. Because the limited time, we couldn't expound or so much on the points that were in here. But the gist of the matter is, can we work together as UN agencies, national governments, the CPD, the Minamata Convention, and join efforts in ensuring a safe and clean environment in the mining sector? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anne, for the presentation. And I think also the closing remarks. I think also for the sake of the time, I can already skip. You really well summarized, actually, the aim of this event, raising awareness of these important issues and how can we work better together, from acknowledging the importance and promoting of science and knowledge, what was in our first part of our event, and then towards the action. So what we can do through the national coordination at the more government level or more coordination, institutional level, and then going to the field and what activities can we better enhance and work together, as for example you mentioned the biodiversity offsets, etc. And I think you also mentioned very important point was working together, perhaps on the projects, joint projects, so also the funding element and possibility to explore better joint synergetic projects to have a better impact. And with that, for the sake of time, I think we're going to close. Thanks again to all the panelists for the presentation. Thank you for joining our event and staying a little bit longer, and for your question. Hope we were able to provide the answer and additional information. And as Shariful mentioned at the beginning, the recording and the presentation will be posted at the Minamata Secretariat website afterwards for your reference. Thank you very much, everyone.
Gosia, just to invite everyone to respond to the post-webinar survey that will come afterwards. Thank you so very much. This will help us improve our services.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.